You're listening to Chapter 1 of The Day Evacuation Orders Went Up. Aiko's 6 days before camp. This story follows a young Japanese-American girl in Little Tokyo in April 1942. On the morning she stops in front of a bulletin board and reads the words that begin to break her world apart. In the 6 days that follow, she watches her neighborhood shift, her home change shape, and her family gather what they can before being forced into a concentration camp. This episode is part of Stories from Camp, a long-form series of Japanese-American narratives designed to help you rest while learning the quiet, human details of life before, during, and after the camps. These stories blend documentary accuracy with soft, nighttime storytelling so you can fall asleep to history spoken gently. Settle in. Breathe. Let the story carry you. The day the evacuation order went up. Aiko's story, April 1942. Chapter 1. Paper on the Pole. Aiko carried her father's lunch through the morning light, the warmth rising off First Street in soft waves. The sidewalk smelled faintly of oranges from the produce stalls, a scent she had known since childhood. Delivery trucks rumbled past, kicking dust into the air. The day felt ordinary enough that she moved without thinking, weaving through shopkeepers sweeping their front steps, passing the familiar rows of vegetables laid out beneath canvas awnings. She turned the corner toward San Pedro and noticed a small crowd gathered at the telephone pole ahead. People pressed close, as if someone had dropped money in the street. Mothers held their children's shoulders tight, and older men leaned forward with narrowed eyes. Aiko slowed, unsure why the group stood so still in a neighborhood always filled with movement. The edges of the crowd parted slightly, and she caught a glimpse of a pale sheet nailed high against the wood. Her pulse shifted. Notices never meant anything small. She stepped closer, the paper bright against the pole, the bold black letters climbing toward her before she reached them. She tilted her head and read the headline, "Instructions to all persons of Japanese ancestry." The words struck with a clarity that left no room for misinterpretation. She felt the weight of the bag in her hand, the glass container pressing hard against her fingers. Someone behind her whispered the date. Another voice began reading the lines aloud, halting on the phrases that controlled every movement of every family in the neighborhood. Aiko read the instructions again, slower this time, letting each sentence settle. The notice listed what they must pack, where they must report, how quickly they must leave. 6 days. The world narrowed to a short, rigid timeline built for strangers to enforce. Aiko stepped back. She watched a man shake his head and turn away, pale as chalk. A mother held a baby against her chest and tried to quiet her breathing. 2 girls from Aiko's school pressed their faces close to the notice, their hair tied with matching ribbons. Aiko recognized the look on their faces, a stunned calculation she felt inside her own ribs. For a moment the entire corner fell silent, as if the city waited to hear what they would do next. Aiko forced herself to walk away from the notice, the crowd's murmurs trailing her like a shifting wind. Her feet carried her toward the produce shop almost on instinct. First Street stretched out in its usual pattern, but the street no longer felt familiar. She moved past the storefront of the sewing shop where she once spent summer afternoons trying on fabric scraps, past the alley where she and her friends traded magazine clippings, past windows that reflected her face in small, fractured pieces. By the time she reached her father's shop, she felt the truth settle into her chest. They would leave. They would pack their life into suitcases that never held enough. The neighborhood she believed would last through every season now stood on the edge of something irreversible. She paused at the doorway, the bell above the frame giving a soft jingle as she stepped inside. Her father looked up from the crates of oranges he had been sorting. The lines around his mouth deepened as he studied her face, and she saw in his expression that he had already heard the whispers floating down the block. He didn't ask if the notice was real. He didn't need to. Aiko set the lunch on the counter. The shop smelled of earth and fruit, but underneath she sensed something new, the thin, metallic trace of fear. It clung to everything, even to the light slipping through the windows. Her father reached for a nearby crate, his hand steady, but she noticed the careful way he lifted it. He had begun measuring his movements without realizing it, preparing for a future neither of them understood. Aiko watched him sort the fruit, the motions deliberate, almost ritualistic, as if repetition could slow the world outside the door. She realized then that this morning marked the end of the life they had known. The notice had declared it plainly. And even though the shop stood unchanged, she sensed how quickly everything would shift once they stepped out of these walls. She pressed her fingers lightly against the counter, the wood warm beneath her touch. The quiet in the shop spread across her shoulders, waiting for her to speak. She took in a breath that felt heavier than the air around her. "Papa," she said softly. The word held everything she could not yet name. Thank you for listening to Chapter 1 of The Day the Evacuation Notice Went Up. This episode is part of Stories from Camp, a continuing series of Japanese-American narratives told as quiet, nighttime historical dramas. If you'd like to hear more, you can explore the rest of the library on our channel. And if you're a storyteller or creator who wants to collaborate with us, you can reach out anytime at redressradio.com.